I'm almost ready. Are we there? I wasn't really talking all that quietly. All right, so we're getting good sound check? I hate tapping. I see that the desserts are starting to move. We have the tres leches cake. We have the flan. I went straight to the dessert tray. They're both delicious. Thanks for staying to the end. I've said goodbye to a few people who have already been on their way out to the airport. But those of you who have stayed, you're being rewarded by what I hope you think is a wonderful lunch, because I've really enjoyed the food. And thanks to Beth Schaefer, I wanted to call her out every year, and she always tries to hide. There's Beth. Every year Beth does our menus, and every year I collect compliments on Beth's work. You know that we're a vegetarian vegan conference, and a number of people have come up to me and said that they appreciate that because it makes it so much easier for them to eat healthy while they're traveling. You may also have noticed that we've had photographers and videographers running all over the conference. You all look fabulous, and you're up on the slideshow. We're capable of sharing these with you. In the past, we've used a photo bucket account. Is anybody using photo bucket? Yeah, that didn't work in the past either. I'm not sure what photo sharing platforms work. We've got like 200 photos that we like, but I'm accepting nominations. So if you have a social media photo sharing platform that works for you, I want to create a space where you can upload your own, and of course you can download the ones that we've taken. That's a segue into thanking our tech team. We self-perform a lot of our own, and by self-perform, we give it over to people who haven't really done it before but figure it out. We do that because the quotes that we get for audiovisual are typically 3-4 times higher than the quotes that we get when we hire people who are like our students and our kids. So this is Payson Seeger in the front. This is my son, in case you haven't recognized him before. He started this in Oakland 2 years ago, and in Michigan I was criticized for not thanking him publicly. I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that. But now I'm going to do that. He's assembled a team. Don't know where Ben Crichton went. He's assembled a team in concert with Ben Crichton. These proceedings have been captured. They've been live streaming. The live streaming has been a little bit in and out. We're hearing from people in Germany and people in Singapore who are like, oh, you dropped it. However, the captures are pretty good. You will find your presentation and those of your colleagues on our YouTube channel after we get these chopped up and posted. That is, after we get our archival video chopped up and posted up on YouTube. Now, I've heard from a few people that this has been a valuable thing for them, that they've gone back to some of the presentations. They wanted to see themselves, which is, of course, my least favorite. But they wanted to also see presentations that they remembered, that they'd taken a few notes on, and they wanted to see again. I need more feedback because the live streaming isn't all that expensive. Once we're going to do the capture, we try the live streaming. But the capture, if that's the important part because it requires the equipment. And if that's valuable to you, I want you to let me know. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end after I introduce our final keynote speaker. So feel free to share your thoughts. Now on to our final keynote speaker. You may have seen Steve Schein's book. There are copies sitting in the back. I knew that I wanted to create a theme of leadership and leadership in sustainability. And so when Johnny Thomas and I started looking around, we found someone that we thought we had a lot in common with, and that was Steve Schein. I asked Steve to come, not just to do a keynote and then to fly back to Portland where he lives. I asked Steve to come and embed himself in our community to see what our presentations are about, how do we think, what are the expectations that we place upon ourselves. And Steve agreed to do that. He's been here for 3 days. And each day he's come up to me at the end and he said, you know what, this is a really neat thing, and I'm going to change my slides. That was Monday. And then he came up to me on Tuesday and said, I've met some more people and I've learned some new things, and I'm going to change my slides. And this morning he said, I got a totally new slide deck because this is such a great community of people I want to be part of. I want to inspire them. I want to build something that lets them go and change the world. My understanding of leadership is creating a future that wasn't going to happen by itself. Steve's mission, as I understand it, is to help people create that future that they want to live in. That's what this community, especially this theme today, is about. So if you will help me welcoming Steve. He's going to tell us about his impressions of us and what we're going to do.
Thank you, Tom. First, Tom stole a little of my thunder that I also wanted to really acknowledge the food, which has been amazing. And, what's the favorite food that I've had? Probably the warm apple cinnamon quinoa at breakfast was just tremendous. So, I think when I was invited here, I knew how much I would learn. When I looked at the agenda, it was clear to me, not being an engineer, not studying resiliency, how much I would learn. But more importantly, what I looked forward to was being inspired. And I knew I would be with a group of sustainability professionals that are putting their heads and their hearts together to solve some of the world's most complex environmental and social challenges. But what surprised me, as Tom alluded to in the last couple of days, is what I didn't expect was the passion and the intensity around really applying your work. And that's not common. The level of commitment that I've seen here during the last 3 days about creatively figuring out ways to accelerate and scale your work is exceptional. So it's inspired me, I'm energized, and I'm honored to give this final talk. So I was inspired and surprised by Gary Dirks talking about trying to raise or reach 100 million people. I was inspired and surprised by Tom Seeger and Dave Woods talking about raising $25 million just as a start to apply these projects across the country. But most of all, I've really been inspired by the awesome cohort in the PhD program. Johnny and Camilla and Margaret and Susan and Marcus and Caitlin and all of you that I didn't get a chance to meet. I couldn't say more forcefully that I really respect what you're doing. And I think, when I think about a theme, I'm going to resist talking about models and theories in my talk because I think we've had a lot of those over the last 3 days. But I couldn't resist one last little model, and I'm now going to call it the 5 C's, which is creativity, courage, which are the 2 main themes that I'm going to talk about today, but communication, culture, and the culture that you have here in this program here at ASU is exceptional. One of the things I talk about is how in sustainability, mostly it's saddlebag sustainability. It's usually bolted on the outside of business programs in particular. But here at ASU, and especially in an engineering school, the extent to which you're integrating a mindset of sustainability is exceptional. So what I want to do is talk about creativity and communication. And I want to start with a little foreplay, since this is how we do at the ISSST. Payson, are we loaded? So I couldn't resist. A couple things happened, as Tom said, just this morning that completely changed my deck. I couldn't resist putting this amazing cartoon from our own Dimitri Chamy, which I also just couldn't resist wanting to say his name. Dimitri Chamy, a designer from Miami via Haiti, via Lebanon. Figure that out. And then after Dimitri emailed me this image this morning, the first thing I saw when I woke up was this. The second thing, when I opened the New York Times, was this op-ed by one of my favorite writers, Tom Friedman, with a picture that kind of somehow in my mind connected Dimitri's cartoon to our work here at the ISSST and creative communication. So this is a very bold piece in the New York Times this morning from Tom Friedman suggesting that Donald Trump can flip on climate. And he talks about his golf courses as something that Donald Trump might care about as it relates to climate. And he talks about evidence in South Florida and the golf courses are going to be underwater. So I put that as an example about creative communication because what I have found over 10 years of working in this field and what I think all of you already know is that one of the big challenges we have is communicating the full implications of sustainability to all the people that we seek to influence. How many times is it reduced to short-term economic considerations, to minor environmental actions, or in the worst case, it's politicized and even abused? And so I thought we'd have a little fun, and I'm going to start by sharing with you my own little creative, courageous communication episode that happened not too long ago when I was interviewed on a radio show by a conservative talk show host, Lars Larson, who, for those of you who don't know, I'd say he's out of the tradition of Rush Limbaugh. And so if you'll bear with me, I'm going to play a little bit of this clip and talk about sustainability and creative, courageous communication. Payson.
Schein joins me now, who's a business professor. Dr. Schein, good to have you on the program.
Thank you, Lars. Nice to be with you.
I understand that you established the first sustainability leadership program at an undergrad school anywhere in the United States.
Undergraduate business school.
One of the first, back in 2007.
All right, now you've got to help me out with this, because every time I hear the word sustainability, I reach to grab my wallet, because I think sustainability, the way it's currently used by a lot of people, is a bit of a scam. But maybe you can help me see it differently.
Okay. So here's the first image that flashed through my mind. So this is our friends, the Koch brothers. And for a long time, this is kind of how I thought about these conflicts I got into around climate and when things were reduced to politics. But I didn't. I regained my composure, and I continued this way.
Sure. I think it's about delivering all the consumer products and our standard of living with the same or lower cost, but doing it in a way that does less harm to the environment. So it's about understanding how the ecosystems work and what these natural resources are, and designing products in a way that we can meet the rise in demand and continue to access all of the natural resources.
So now that I had successfully parried his first blow at trying to reduce sustainability to a hollow buzzword, here's how I was thinking about myself. Yes, even the world's most interesting man, when he's not selling Dos Equis beer, can use the word sustainability meaningfully. Now, at the risk of shortcutting what was really a very tense, he kept me on for 3 sessions, and he's continued to want to have me on the program. And as he kind of got into a lot of typical arguments around fracking and energy security, here's another image that flashed in my mind. So as I've looked at this image, I've kind of had this weird kind of karmic ecological justice thought, with looking at the earth and thinking about the conflict. And so, I think that all of us have been here in this situation, and the question about trying to scale our work and creatively communicate and reach large audiences, what I've found is we really need to reach across these boundaries, and we need to think about it creatively, and we need to think about it courageously. So here's one more image that also came up in the last day. This is, for those of you who don't know, a picture of Steph Curry, who's one of the world's most extraordinary basketball players of all time. And even in the NBA, they're talking about sustainability. I was watching the game, and they had just beaten the Portland Trail Blazers the night before, 2 nights before, and in the fourth quarter, the Blazers had fallen apart. And as the team came out into the fourth quarter, the announcer says, what Coach Terry Stotts of the Portland Trail Blazers is looking for from his team tonight is sustainability. And I thought, what can we do with this? I'm sitting here thinking about Steph Curry, and I'm thinking about sustainability, and I'm thinking about all of you. And really what it comes down to is Steph Curry, for me, is someone who defies the odds What I find amazing about him is he consistently taps into some kind of extraordinary power and defies the odds. And so as I sit here and I think about ISSST and I think about this amazing work that all of you are doing, that's the question that I'm going to explore, is how can we defy the odds? Because when we really know that we're really up against extraordinary cultural and economic and environmental challenges. So I am having some fun with Steph Curry as someone who can inspire us. Whoop. So what I've found, and my research shows, is that many of the most courageous and influential sustainability leaders are informed and empowered by their worldviews. And by understanding worldviews, we can tap into greater courage. We can also understand resistance. And we can get into a different way of thinking about how we can have impact with our work in sustainability. And one of the key capacities here that I think all of you kind of recognize is that seeing yourself in the system, both human organizational systems and ecological systems, is what is a capacity to really scale your impact. And this has to do, I think, with your work in resilience in a variety of ways. Now, I've talked about defying the odds. And the question is, what if we as change agents, because I'm going to ask you as we kind of close the conference, to think about yourselves more as change agents. You're scientists, you're engineers, you have your data, you have your empirical evidence. But I think in terms of really what's going to make a difference, in terms of applying your work and having impact, is to really anchor this capacity as a change agent, as a courageous sustainability leader, how you show up, how you communicate. And my invitation is to ask you is, what if we as sustainability change agents could really harness this power of shifting worldviews, of understanding how people think, of showing up differently when we're in these kind of stressful situations, and wouldn't that capacity of shifting worldviews be a tremendous power? And wouldn't it even be a type of superpower? So as I sit here, and I kind of got a kick out of Tom's socks, being the Superman socks, and I thought, he's kind of a Superman. He really is. And I think there's other people in the sustainability movement that have inspired me that are really real-life Supermen. And so this is one that many of you know. He's kind of the iconic case study. He was the first CEO of a public company that put a stake in the ground for a zero ecological footprint. His name was Ray Anderson. And what was remarkable about him, and what I found really interesting, was not so much just what he did at Interface, but that he spoke about his motivation for sustainability in very personal and very spiritual terms. He was very out front talking about the epiphany he had about the world's ecological crisis, and very upfront that business needed to lead the way. And my conversation with him over lunch 10 years ago deeply inspired me to do the work I've done for the last 10 years. And I wanted to start with him as kind of a real-life Superman, because he's very, very important to all of us in the sustainability movement. So this is kind of his successor that's widely regarded in the business world. This is Paul Pullman, who's the CEO of Unilever, which is one of the world's largest consumer products company. And he also is a CEO that has been very, very vocal and upfront at the climate talks and in countless interactions with world governments about the need to redesign all products and services and supply chains to do no harm to the earth. And he's doing it while navigating that short-term economic environment of a public company. And so this is kind of a beginning of what I want to start to talk about, is what does motivate these types of leaders to be courageous, to be all in on sustainability? What is it that separates all of us in this room that are making a lifelong career commitment to a value called sustainability, and everybody else that we really want to change? And so this idea of navigating the short-term financial bottom line while consistently integrating mentally, social, and environmental connections is a part of a worldview that I want to suggest is what separates those of us that are completely committed to sustainability. So here's somebody else that when I think about scale and I start to think about what Gary Dirks was saying, and I think about what we're doing here at ISSST, that many of you may be aware, and I should say I'm not talking about Evo Morales here in this picture with his Che Guevara pin, which you may or may not be able to see, but I'm talking about Pope Francis. Pope Francis wrote the environmental encyclical last summer, which was addressed to the world's 1.1 billion Catholics, but it's actually one of the most extraordinary descriptions of sustainability leadership and ecological worldviews that we've had. And it ended up influencing 195 countries to sign the Paris Agreement. It played a very key role running up through the fall in the New York climate talks. And so I suggest that when we think about scale and we think about reaching a lot of people, that everybody be aware of what Pope Francis has done in this book, the encyclical. In chapter 3, he talks about the human roots of the ecological crisis. And he suggests that we need a new synthesis capable of overcoming the false assumptions of the recent century. What he's really talking about is worldviews and overcoming the entrenched, short-term, positivistic, reductionist, overly mechanistic worldview that we're all kind of running up against here. And that's why it's so, I think, fascinating that here at ASU and ISSST that you're through this lens of resiliency and infrastructure and engineering also kind of motivated around this type of worldview. I want to touch on a piece that I know a member of your cohort has been inserting into your program, Johnny's work on integral, because chapter 4 of the encyclical is entitled Integral Ecology. And what Pope Francis is saying that we really need a comprehensive new economic ecology that is based on interaction with natural systems and social systems. And he inspires world leaders to think that way. So integral meaning complete. And what he talks about is really just a complete picture of reality. So I suggest that we integrate the Pope, if you will, get on the Pope-mobile, all of us, because here's a world leader who's taking big risks and putting himself out there and talking about an ecological worldview, and has already deeply inserted himself in world politics at scale, witness the Paris Climate Agreement. So what's interesting, and why I guess maybe I talk about the Pope in my talks, is around the same time that the encyclical came out, my book came out, and I also had a peer-reviewed article in this Journal of Management of Global Sustainability come out, which is the official journal of Jesuit business schools, and it was peer-reviewed by a number of Jesuit scholars around the world, and here a secular Jew ended up all of a sudden being interviewed by Catholic priests asking to interpret what the Pope was saying. It was surreal to say the least, and it ended me with this man. Giacomo Costa is a Jesuit priest scholar. He's the executive director for the San Fedele Institute, and he is the one who translated the encyclical. He has one of the only signed copies of the encyclical from Pope Francis, and he is the one that entitled Chapter 4, Integral Ecology. And so when he invited me to come visit him, I said via email, and he was kind of in somewhat broken English, where is your office? And he said, just come up to the Duomo, and it's the door on the right. Well, I don't know how many of you have seen the Duomo in Milan, Italy, but it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. Like you're coming up to this just impossibly ornate, giant building, and here I go to the door on the right, and we go through, and here's Giacomo, and he couldn't have been more delightful. And what he, I want to share with you one thing he said to me, because I'm going to bring it back to courage and something Thomas touched on, and I think all of you as scientists and physicists are aware of, which I'll call quantum social change. Giacomo told me that he thought in Italy, within a couple of weeks of the encyclical being published, that it erased 500 years of the separation between the church and science and big business in Italy. And I've sat there with that thought of, okay, the Pope is a change agent, ecological worldviews, 500 years of a social, cultural, psychological shift. So I invite us as change agents to kind of put this arrow in our quiver, that there is something mysterious about social change. Time allowing, I'll talk about a sociologist from the University of Norway who is the chair of the IPCC Adaptation Committee, Karen O'Brien, who also talks about quantum social change, and that there is something hard to reduce to a short-term linear causal relationship happening for all of us as sustainability change agents. And so this experience with Giacomo is kind of one that I've continued to anchor and think about what's possible in terms of how we might flip to some of the things we want to see happen, like a price on carbon and resilient, large-scale resilient cities across the country, that things are possible, and especially when we reflect on you know, what is in front of us today. So I think with a little bit of time, I want to just touch on a couple areas that that I think we're all going to relate to. And there's this big gap, and you're kind of stepping into the middle of it. There's a giant gap between sustainability practice, education, and leadership development. And these are some pictures on the bottom of some of the books and some of the mainstream books in the business world that get at this idea of interior leadership development. And it's not generally integrated into sustainability, and it's certainly not generally integrated into engineering schools or MBA programs. And that's what I think is a missing perspective related to harnessing the power of ecological worldviews for change. Now this is a picture of a place I call the High Camp up on my land, and it's of MBA students and environmental studies students and Native American drum and dance students. And we've done this every spring, and I've personally witnessed, by just having this cross-disciplinary experience embedded in nature with the magic of indigenous drumming. This is a picture of Brent Florendo, who's a Native American professor. We have a Native American Studies minor at Southern Oregon University. But this experience, more than any single experience, I've witnessed these kind of new levels of awareness in business students in particular. And I've continually reflected on the power of nature to mysteriously impact people's experience. And the question is, can you then anchor that? Can you then integrate it? And so what we do is we do personal sustainability projects that make it very personal. And this is something that came out of Walmart and Saatchi a decade ago, but we don't do it enough in all of these business programs, and we don't do it enough in corporations to make sustainability personal and anchor it in a personal way. Now here's one other personal experience I had. This is a picture standing in that same spot looking up the sky a few years later of a plane dropping fire retardant on a blaze that happened right next to my land. And as I ran around in an adrenaline-fueled haze, cutting down trees with a chainsaw, and my wife was emptying out the house of possessions, it dawned on me that this is kind of the face of climate change in the West. And something amazing happened that following spring. Beetles that had been flushed out of the fire landed up at the High Camp, and hundreds of ponderosa trees started to die from the top down. And it also dawned on me how little I understood about how really natural systems work. And this was just one example writ large of really what the whole planet is facing. And so as a former CEO, as a CPA, as a business professor, I thought, you know, how little I understand about the mystery of how the natural world works. So as I close, I want to talk about this experience I had with a gray whale. This is a gray whale in San Ignacio Lagoon in Mexico, and I'm leaning into her, and my hand is on her mouth, and she is looking me in the eye, and I am looking her in the eye, and she is responding to my touch and my voice. And it's a great story because they have created a refuge there, and the gray whales now number more than 25,000 compared to only a few hundred in the Western Pacific. And the amazing thing is that the president of Mexico at the time, in 2000, Ernesto Zedillo, had this same experience with his family, close to close, eye to eye, with this charismatic megafauna, these gray whales. And there's a lot more to the story with the NRDC and various NGOs, but at the time, Mitsubishi wanted to build a big salt plant. And Zedillo had this experience and put a stake in the ground to protect these whales. And we all know about the oceans here. We all know about indicators. But I think what we don't know enough is how these kind of experiences cause these epiphanies and scale and affect hundreds of millions of people. So I leave you with this image of this gray whale. And, you know, we've had lots of models and maps and theories, and the science you do here is amazing. And that's so important. It's what creating knowledge is all about. But I think what I wonder is, in the end, what will matter even more is the extent that you can tap into your personal superpower and your courage to creatively communicate about sustainability. Thank you. So we have plenty of time. I have a whole kind of second deck with lots of models and slides, but let's go wherever we want to go, Tom. Yeah. Yeah, good. Perfect. Please. You know, it's been a really, it's been a really interesting, you know, I'm a psychologist as well, and it's allowed me to reflect on who I am and where I'm from, and bring a lot of religious dialogue, and it made me, you know, there's these big movements. There's the eco-Jesuit movement, eco-Kashrut in Judaism, eco-Islam. I've been quoted in these blogs in the Middle East about ecological worldviews, and that kind of discussion, I think, is the kind of discussion that we need. In my own case, you know, I'm aware that part of my intensity and my seriousness around sustainability is because I come from this kind of long line of Russian Jews culturally. I had some fun talking to Igor Linkov about that yesterday, and I've even become aware, you know, that you know, this is who I am. You know, my parents were pretty serious, secular Jews, but serious about the world. My mother, in particular, was always talking about global politics, and in you know, in somewhat of a pessimistic way, but a serious way. And you know, I always thought, you know, I wasn't exactly like her. I was more optimistic, and you know, so I went into climate change. You know, and I just thought I'd take the pessimism up a whole new notch. You know, but I'd like to think she'd be proud of me. You know, that she would have gotten a lot of mileage out of climate change, my mom. So that's my secular Judaism. Please, Johnny. Yeah. 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 You know, so the burning question I've had for 10 years since I met Ray Anderson was kind of this question about motivation. And, you know, really my methodology of doing my own PhD was interviewing about 100 senior executives in companies and asking them simply that question. You know, it really was, I just wanted to know, you know, how did you become who you are? And what I got was all these stories about childhood and about experiences in nature and reflection. And those aren't the typical experiences we have in boardrooms. I do strategy work with corporations. We're not typically having these reflective discussions about who we are and why we're doing what we're doing. And yet it's created this intimacy that I feel like I have with all these executives that is really about seeing each other and our motivation. And so as relates to sustainability and kind of not working around the margins and kind of doing incremental work that's safe, that is embedded in the short-term financial strategy and the brand of the company, unless we get at those interior motivations, I think we're just going to go too slow. Please, Lisa. What is your superhero, Lisa? Yeah. Well, in my own way, that conversation with Lars Larson was scary. And I even, I think about myself as getting further out as a climate activist. I sit on the National Board of Net Impact. We have 70,000 members and 300 chapters, and we have a new climate disruptors program that I've been working on with Liz Ma, the CEO, and we modeled it after Up with Equal, which is a fantastic change that's happened in corporations in our country in terms of marriage equality over the last several years. And I'd suggest that it is an example of quantum social change. And we thought, what if we could all out ourselves as climate activists? And in my case, I didn't. For a long time, I taught in the university, and I started a sustainability leadership program, and I studied all the ways that corporations were integrating sustainability, but I really was not as courageous about climate. The chair of our foundation owns a public car company and was a climate change denier and was kind of that third rail of, let's not offend our funders by talking about climate change. Well, the reality is it's been driving, that's my Jewish secular worrying. I've been waking up every day for 10 years worried about climate change. And I need to continue to embody that. And so I'm not saying it's so simple for all of you, but I am saying that there is some part of your story. I just told a story about a fire and a whale and a Lars Larson. Each of you have some interactions, some stories where maybe you're holding back, maybe you're being too cautious. I can get into a lot of theory about developmental psychology and post-conventional worldviews and eco-psychology, and we can go there, but in the end, what I think it's really kind of asking yourself is what's really deeply motivating you, and I think that can it's like the gift that keeps on giving. Honestly, you can keep showing up in different ways and different conversations and honoring that part of yourself, really kind of holding that more front and center. So that's a one way to think about it. Please. Sure. Yeah, totally. No, that's why I'm so honored to be. I think the work you're doing here has such enormous impact, and when I talk about a superpower, or if this work around resiliency and cities and infrastructure and the water system in LA and microgrids can really scale and accelerate, that can mitigate a lot of suffering. I'm under the opinion there's going to be accelerating human suffering. It's really just a question of what scale. So it's kind of this race to the bottom and a race to the top at the same time. But I think this work you're doing here is as important work as anyone could do. And so, and the numbers it's really kind of one person at a time. Thanks.
One of the things I was thinking about asking Steve, and then I didn't put it on you, Steve, because it's the transition to what I want to do now, which is invite people to participate in our community as leaders. And sometimes what holds people back is that they don't think of themselves as a leader. The leader is not the one who approves your travel authorization request. The leader is not the one who fills out your annual performance review and stack ranks you against your colleagues. The leader is the one who builds a stage like this and allows people to shine in a way that influences others, that creates this future that wasn't going to happen by itself. So during this conference, a number of people have come up to me and they've said, hey, this is great, I've met so many good people, I've had some really good conversations, I want to help. And I haven't done a good job of integrating those people who want to help. I want to do a better job. Lisa Lauren has been collecting names of people who've come up to her and said, this is a wonderful community. How do I contribute? There's two things that happen. One is you want to help, you want to contribute, and I want you to lead. Propose your thing. Make your thing happen. Bring other people along with you. And for goodness sakes, it doesn't matter if it's crazy because you've seen the kind of stuff that I do and the people that I invite to come to ISSST. You couldn't possibly be any more, I mean, we were talking about weirdos the other day. You couldn't possibly any more be out there than we already are. So this is inviting your group and your communities that you think would appreciate what we're trying to do here and learn and teach and bring them in. So it's not so much helping. If you're ready to lead, lead, and I will clear the stage for you. But if helping is what you're ready for, then Lisa and I and Jeremiah want to make it easier for you to help. Give us your contact information, and we will structure our interactions in a way that allows you to get to know how we work and helps teach us how to work better. For example, our next conference will be in 2017. And for the first time since 2011, the International Society for Industrial Ecology will also be having their conference in North America. Many people here, we've asked this question, also or sometimes attend the Industrial Ecology Conference. May I have a brief show of hands? Are you intending to go to the International Society for Industrial Ecology Conference in Chicago in 2017? Sharut's going, he's from Chicago, Dan's going, Brandon's going, Andrea's going, she's right up the road, sure. Charlie's going, Jeremiah's going. I don't know what percentage that is, but the people that I've talked to do not want to have to choose between one community and another community. So IS4IE has approached us and said, how do we blend the two? And the answer is, we haven't figured it out. But it's the last week in June, it's in Chicago, it's a departure from our traditional time slot between Mother's Day and Memorial Day, and we're going to try and figure out how to do something with them. It'll be on the University of Illinois campus, Illinois Chicago campus. There are a lot of things that they do that traditionally we don't, and that does not preclude anyone's participation. So what am I asking? Please see Lisa, please see Jeremiah, please see me. We are not going to put you on an email list serve. I mean, in this case, helping is not deleting our emails. We need a better way of communicating. We need a better way of assigning and tracking tasks so that people can create the things that they want to create in this community, and we're ready to do that. These are my, that's the penultimate announcement. The last announcement is that the PV Summit is continuing. We sort of have our PV leadership table, and I was lurking in their session a couple of hours ago. You have some extraordinary thought leaders in the photovoltaics community. Life cycle assessment is the theme, but sustainability is writ large, much larger than the methods of life cycle assessment. So they're reconvening at 2, they're going to go all the way to 5, and everyone who's registered for ISSST is welcome to participate in that. Beth, have I missed anything? Books in the back, yes. This sounds great. Then I'm hoping to see you multiple times, but if not until June of 2017 in Chicago, then I'm hoping to see you June 2017 in Chicago. Thanks for coming out now.